In this video, we will identify one-to-one functions. So if you'll recall previously, we learned whether or not a relation was a function by saying every x had to have only one y. So if I had 2 that mapped to 3 and 2 that mapped to 4, this was not a function because 2 maps to 2 different y values. Now we're looking for whether or not a function, so we already know it's a function, we're asking is it one-to-one, and so this is going to be backwards. This is saying for every value in our domain, if those x values do not equal one another, then those y values do not equal one another. So for instance, my first example down here, this is a function because all of the x values are different. And it's one-to-one because all of the y values are different. My second example, all of my x values are different, but if you'll notice, 7 occurred when I plugged in 3, which means if I found f of 3, I got 7, and if I found f of 9, I got 7. And this definition says if a does not equal b, so 3 does not equal 9, then their outputs cannot equal to one another, and we can see there that this does not fit that description, and therefore this is not one-to-one, since their outputs do equal one another. So again, we're going to look at different ways in which to determine this. We're going to look at graphs. This is a mapping. So when we looked at this previously to determine if it was a function, we said that everything coming out of the domain, which is this side of course, could only be mapped to one thing. Now that we're looking at one-to-one functions, we're saying everything in the range, sometimes called the codomain, can only be mapped to from one number. And so since 1 is mapped to from both 5 and 7, this is not a function, not a one-to-one function. If our function is already graphed, we can use the horizontal line test. So if you'll recall previously, we did a vertical line test to tell whether a graph was a function. So I could draw a vertical line and say, since my line only ever hits one point, these are both functions. Now we already know their functions. We're looking at the horizontal line test, and if it's the same concept, if I can draw a line, try to be more horizontal than me, and only ever hit one point, so hit here, etc., then it is one-to-one. So this one clearly is one-to-one. However, if I draw a line this way, notice I'm hitting 2 points, so this one is not one-to-one because it fails the horizontal line test. So here's one more example for us to look at together. And notice I don't have a graph and I don't have a set of ordered pairs. So what I can do is I can create a set of ordered pairs from the function. I can graph the function. But really, because we all know what a function like this looks like, this is a quadratic function. And so I know that even though it's not going to be exactly like this, my function is going to look something like this, right? Because it's a quadratic, and quadratics means a parabola. And so without having to do any work, I know that if I graphed that, that would not pass the horizontal line test. Another way that you could go about it more mathematically, if you had to show work to show that it's not one-to-one, you could show that if I plugged in, say, 4 times 1 squared minus 7, so this would be f of 1, and that would be 4 minus 7, which is negative 3. Then I could also plug in negative 1, so 4 times negative 1 squared minus 7 would still be 4 minus 7, which is negative 3. So this mathematically shows that even though f of a equals f of b, a does not equal b, and therefore it is not a one-to-one function. So here are a couple of examples for you to try. Use whichever means you would like to figure this out. Once you're done, press play to see how you did. So my first example, again, I'm looking at my y values because I don't have any repeated y values. Then I know we're okay. This is 1 to 1. For b, this hopefully we recognize as a linear function. It would go through at -7 and have a slope of 2, so it would look roughly like this. And we can see, of course, that that would pass the horizontal line test quite easily. So that would also be a yes. Whereas our last question, obviously, is a no, because I'm hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots, and all I can do is hit 1 for it to be 1 to 1. So this is a no.